Hi, I'm Brandon Evans, the Chief Elevation Officer for One Heart, and today we will be talking about conscious leadership and how leaders can become more conscious and live more fulfilling lives.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron, founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I am here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything. Let me ask you, what do you need to do to up-level your leadership? Well, on this episode, we're going to dive into creating conscious leadership and conscious business. How? Well, stay tuned. Remember, you can chat about this episode or any past episodes inside of our Facebook group by just going to Facebook and looking for Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. As always, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you tune into podcasts. We're always needing your help to stay relevant. So please go over to iTunes, rate, review, and of course, subscribe to the show. When you do, please let us know. We would love to give you a shout out. You can also catch us on traditional radio stations across the United States every Monday and Thursday, where we go out all the way from Georgia to Philadelphia. If you're a regular listener, you can also want to say a big thank you to you because we really appreciate your assistance in helping us to stay as the top podcast in the world for Fortune 500 listeners. You can also catch us on Roku TV, where there's over 100,000 subscribers. And with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every show, we're honored to be and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. By the way, you can also listen to us through Google Home or Alexa simply by saying, play Dov Baron podcast. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, someone in the C-suite, a sales leader, an entrepreneur, a leader in any capacity, we all know that as leaders of all shapes, sizes, and varieties, we are all driven. The question is, and it's a question that often is skipped over, what are we really driving to and why? If you're a highly successful leader and entrepreneur, you have likely had at least a couple of moments where you've wondered, what's it all about? And what's the real point of whatever it is that we're pursuing? For some leaders, that's a natural evolution. For others, it's forced. The question is, what has to happen for you to have the kind of awakening needed? Well, stay tuned because our guest today is Brandon Evans. Brandon is a serial entrepreneur who previously built 2 companies valued at over 100 million. But after what he describes as a spiritual awakening, his focus shifted. Brandon's new company, One Heart, has a mission to foster a new generation of heart-led leaders birthing conscious companies by using business as a force for good to transform lives and the planet. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Brandon Evans!
Thank you. Definitely the best welcoming I've gotten in a while.
Well, hopefully you'll get a welcoming like that at your wedding.
Yeah.
Maybe. We'll see. So, I spoke about that in the intro, that it's about conscious leadership. You and I have that in common. But let's just start there for a minute, because I think that this is something that's up for interpretation, and maybe people will have their own interpretation of it. From your point of view, what does it mean to be a conscious leader?
Sure. Yeah, and I've heard many interpretations as well. I mean, I think the way we view it and the way I like to think about it is, consciousness is really a level of awareness. So you can be aware in a whole bunch of areas. You can be aware as to how you treat your employees. You can be aware as to how you spend your dollars. You can be aware as to what you're putting into the environment and how you're ultimately helping people. So all of those, I think can certainly be levels of conscious, conscious leaders. We like to try to focus on on companies and leaders where, they're potentially putting all of that together. And that's the ultimate goal, when you can really look at your company and have a place where you're treating everyone well, where you're putting out a product that the world truly needs, and you're doing business in a way where, finances and profits don't necessarily dictate, all that you do. I think in this world, it's certainly necessary, and we recognize that profits are a way to resource a company and to grow and to have greater impact. But what do you focus on beyond that, and how does that drive the organization?
Yeah, I mean, and again, to be clear, so that everybody listening here understands, in case you missed the opening here, you are an entrepreneur. You've been a serial entrepreneur. You've built several companies, like 2 companies that are valued at over $100 million. So it's not like you don't understand that side of the business. However, one of the things that you and I have in common is this desire to bring love into leadership at a real sort of connected level. Talk to us about what you see as a shift in this being seen as, often seen as woo-woo, to having a real place in leadership.
Yeah, and that's a space, I mean, especially with some of the things we're doing now, where, it's a fine line sometimes. And
Sure.
I think sometimes it's hard to bring the heart in and not have people think you're woo-woo. But that really has been a lot of my path. I built both my companies in New York, was there for 15 years, walked fast, talked fast, did everything fast. And was super analytical. I had reasons for everything that I did, strategy, plans, and, that was all great. And ended up building successful companies from that. But at the end of the day, when I started to go back and look at what I built and how that was in line with my purpose and what I wanted to do going forward, those weren't necessarily aligned. And for a while, I tried to use the mind to get me there and tried to think my way in and out of it. And, I think it's what, Einstein has a quote about, needing to use a different method to solve a problem other than the way that you got to that problem. And for me, that was dropping into my heart. And that's really where kind of my spiritual, kind of path has taken me, and where, we like to work with leaders now is, how do you drop into your heart? Because without doing that, you're really going to continue to make a lot of the same decisions, even if you have maybe some better thoughts or some better ideas.
Well, I mean, even saying things like dropping into your heart, is like, creates eye rollage. Creates a lot of eye rollage. But, this was something that you, like you said, you just said, you were in New York, you built your companies, you were very successful. And then you sort of had an awakening. You wrote a pretty viral article called Lost on Purpose. Please share with our audience sort of the turning point in your life, in your leadership, in your business that got you to this place.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of the Cliff Note version. I mean, I had basically started I had built a company, a successful, we were really one of the first social marketing agencies, right at the boom of social media. We sold that company to Publicis, one of the big advertising conglomerates, very successful sale. Right before selling that, I actually spun off a tech company called CrowdTap right before the sale. So I had no time to transition, basically dropped right in. Ended up bringing 11 years in. We'd grown sales 3x every post basically, you're going to go out and raise some more money. We want to see you go out and raise $20 million. Let's go, go big on this thing, as many VCs do. And I think at that moment, I had known for some time that I was looking for something with more meaning and more purpose, and was looking for my path, I guess, out. And so I guess when that conversation happened, I realized, okay, well, this is this is another good 5 years to build the size company that would justify that type of investment. And once you have $35 million into a company, you're building something pretty large at that point.
Sure.
And at the time, we were still in kind of the advertising technology world, and we were helping brands sell products that people didn't need, things that were not healthy, and it just didn't motivate me anymore. And so, I kept saying I wasn't ready to raise the money. Eventually, my investors came to me and told me I'm fired, and which was really, a huge blessing in disguise, because I was, I had built a team I loved and was struggling to walk away and figure out how to leave. And that kind of gave me a kick in the pants to obviously, without my own choice, kind of leave the company that I'd founded. I then also around the same time got engaged, married, divorced in a period of about 3 years total.
Right.
And so it was kind of going through that, and just assessing my life. And I've kind of always achieved the goals I had set out. I was living in a nice apartment in New York, having built successful companies, had a beautiful wife, and was just looking at it and it's like, I'm not fulfilled. Like, what's missing? Like, what do I change? And it got to kind of what I was discussing earlier, where it wasn't something I was able to think my way out of. I was going in circles. Right. My mind was trying to come up with answers, and it was clear, they weren't there to be found. And so that really set me off, fortunately, on a path where I traveled, quite a bit, went off to Southeast Asia, got a bit more serious with my yoga meditation practices, and then ultimately found plant medicine, ayahuasca, which became a big part of my journey as well, right. in really stepping into my heart.
And we want to talk about all that in a moment, but yeah. I want to go back here a little bit because, you talked about this point. I've spoken often about how the difficulty with letting go when something works. And when I say works, I'm talking about works in the context of the world looking at it.
Yep.
So, here's Brandon out in the world, raising millions of dollars, building multi-million-dollar organizations, highly successful. You take a snapshot of this guy. He's engaged to a beautiful woman. He lives in a fabulous apartment in Manhattan. It all looks pretty fucking rosy, right? It all looks pretty freaking rosy. Everything is pretty amazing. And at an egoic level, and by that, I don't mean of the egos of the people looking in. I mean at the ego level of the individual. That's hard to let go of. Human beings, we all want change, and at the same time, we all want to stay the same. And the pull between those two places can be very dramatic in a human being. The desire to let go and the desire to hold on are often equal forces, and that's what causes us the internal tension. I think that tension, I know because of the work that I do privately with the clients that I work with who are people like you just described, I know that often that pull it's diametrically opposed, but fierce, and becomes more so because the validation in the world is all, if you're broke and you're going through that, you're like, okay, well, I got nothing to lose. But right. if you're like, no, I've got $1 million company, or I've got a multi or a tens or $100 million company. If I've got all that, and I've got the nice car, and I've got the good looking woman, and I've got the good looking guy, and I've got the nice apartment, giving that up, that's like, so yeah. What I'm more interested in here is this shift point. When it all looks right, what was that catalytic moment of, this isn't working, this isn't fulfilling? Because in that moment, which I'm sure you had many of, it's easy to sort of bat that away like a little mosquito and go, whatever, bugger off.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I trace it to one individual moment, like you
No,
said.
no.
It was really this buildup of like going to work every day and just arriving and just not having meaning, and for much of my career, I had meaning in or motivation, I should say, in what I was doing. And it was always, I always had this desire to maybe do something with greater purpose and greater meaning. But it was always like, okay, well, let's just hit all these goals first. Let's make this money, and then we can go and do what we want to do. And, as soon as that stopped working and that stopped being a motivation, um, you would come to work, I'd come to work every day and I'd be like, okay, there's nothing I'm passionate about doing right now. Like what am I doing? And then I'd come home and I'd, feel like I was, alone in a relationship, and I wasn't connected to my partner in the way that I'd always, kind of thought I would be. And much of that was myself and where I was in my life at the time. And, those feelings, just on repeat for months and months, and trying to then go through that in your head and figure out answers, just led me to be like, look, I have to make some pretty major changes, or recommit myself to this company and to this woman. And, that ultimately wasn't the decision that I felt I could make.
So was there any, and I'm going to use the term derogatory in a derogatory sense, but I don't mean it that way at all, which is, was there a connection to the woo-woo before? So when you were building all these things and you were doing the things that led you to that place, had you had any sort of background into those, that kind of world? Because, you talked about being very analytical and trying to get there with your mind. So I wonder, was that sort of on the periphery, or was it just not on the horizon at all before?
I was very curious, and there were some moments in different parts of my life that made me think, and like, I took them to heart, and they had some transition, and then I would kind of go back to, to my life. I studied, in particular, I was studying Kabbalah for about 5 years in New York prior, but it was very much an intellectual exercise for me. It was, it all made sense to me. I understood, it was a system. I agreed with much of what they were saying, and it fit into my, it fit into my beliefs, I guess, at the time. But what it wasn't doing is getting me to really come from my heart in the decisions I was making. I was still trying to use that information as another input with all the other information in my mind, and that kind of, jumbles things up a bit. Yeah,
it's interesting, and I'll tell you, because this is a direct philosophy of the work that we do is, people will very often step up and say, yeah, I want to do this work with you, Dov. I met this person and they're doing this and it's pretty cool, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. And I can tell they're not going to commit. And and they seem very intellectually committed, but I know they're not, even more than they do. And why? They're not in enough pain. And that's why I asked you, because this world was not unfamiliar to you, but you're doing it as an intellectual exercise. It's only when the weight of this emptiness, it seems, forgive me, it seems like the weight of that emptiness of going to an apartment that's like, don't care, a relationship that, as you said, I'm lonely inside the relationship, and the lack of meaning in the work.
Yeah.
Talk to us now about the other side, which is what I call the catalystic pain, which is often intellectually involuntary, but metaphysically very voluntary, which is getting fired from your own company. So it's like, oh my God, because that's the tearing away of that world and leaving you. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Let us in on, because there's probably listeners going through something very similar right now.
Yeah, I mean, initially it was, a big blow to my ego. I had never been fired before. Hadn't really had a failure, I would say, in
let
school.
alone from your own company.
Yeah. I mean, I my first company, didn't necessarily make it, but I hadn't had a true kind of fall on your face failure, in my work and professional life. And so that was, that was a wake up call for me for sure. And it stung initially, but pretty quickly after, there was that sense of relief, and I started feeling into like this is what needed to happen. And I've since talked to many people that have had similar stories, whether it's being fired from a corporate job or their company failing, and it took that outside push to get them out of what they were doing. And then when they rebuild themselves, they're able to take a few moments, really look at why that last thing didn't work and go into the next. Whereas the successes I had, I took almost no time to think about them. And I was just on to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. And, before you look at it, I was working in New York for 15 years without really contemplating what I was doing and how my life had changed and what I wanted from my life.
So the company ends, you realize I've been feeling lost and feeling without purpose for a while. Is that when you went to Southeast Asia, or is that when you sort of went on a quote unquote spiritual self-awareness journey? Was that the beginning of it?
That was early on. I had started doing some work, in New York, but New York's a hard place to do the self-development work. At least for me, there was so many ties to my previous life. And,
of course.
Not a lot of ways to get out into nature and really explore and shift things. So it just became clear to me I needed to get out of that environment. And I had a feeling I was going to move from New York, but I didn't, I wasn't ready to do that yet, and didn't know how to approach that. I was actually still living with my ex. So, I mean, we're very friendly, and it was very amicable, but so we were living together for a while after we had basically broke up. So it was a chance for me to really just get out of the house and go have my space and really figure out, what was next. So that was definitely a big piece of being able to kind of move on and start to find my footing again.
So you talked about going, to these places, and you talked about spiritual journeys and even quote unquote plant medicines and those kinds of things. And I know that you've explored that, but that in and itself has become a business, because now you you take people on journeys. You have a company that does that, and you're also creating I believe you're creating a documentary. Tell us a little bit about that part of the journey, because now, you went from business to spiritual to now spiritual business, which is cool.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's but it's something that, is hard to balance sometimes, and something that we're constantly looking at. But at the end of the day, I mean, my partner and I, when I say we, is actually my best friend for 20 years and started One Heart with me. But where we ultimately took it was, what do we think is the highest value we can provide right now? And we both had similar stories. He had a successful company in San Francisco. He was struggling with a startup here in Miami, where I now live. And we both were like, there's got to be better ways to build companies. There's got to be better lives for these entrepreneurs. There's got to be ways where they can be working on things that really do good in the world and help others. And as we thought about our paths and what had been impactful, plant medicine, ayahuasca was a big piece of that. There were some other different courseworks and other things that we did together and separate. And we basically decided, let's take some of these entrepreneurs, let's take them and show them, some of the things that we've learned, show them some of our path, and bring them together and see what happens. And we just had, so much success on the first retreat that we did, that we ended up really kind of doubling down and making that our central focus for what we do. And what we're really focused on now is really holding that space and bringing entrepreneurs together, helping entrepreneurs, gain that consciousness, gain that next level in their life, elevate their lives to a place where they can go out and they can be building the things that really drive meaning and purpose in their lives. And so they can feel the self-love and feel the, all those, things that are critical to really be finding the partners we want in our lives, to be treating employees the way that we want to be treating them, and to be the people that we want to be. And so we've just seen tremendous success by bringing those types of people together in that type of environment. And a lot of it is also shifting your tribe and who you hang out with. And so being able for these people to find more of those people that they can continually, be in touch with, sometimes the spiritual world can get pretty woo-woo. So being able to see other people like yourself, meet other entrepreneurs, other leaders, other people that are looking and creating things in the world, that have created things in the world, and sharing that connection with them has been really powerful.
Yeah. So what do you believe, sort of what breakthroughs do you believe can have the most positive impact on our collective future?
I mean, with this, without sounding too woo-woo, I mean, a lot of things do come down to self-love. A lot of the issues that we face are people feeling they're not good enough in one way or another, feeling, not attributing the love to themselves. I mean, what we do as entrepreneurs is the opposite of self-love. We beat ourselves to a pulp, give ourselves almost no credit, celebrate almost nothing, work ourselves worse than any of our employees, and, say that we're doing it, for some mission that we probably lose track of along the way, and our investors, gain financial ownership of along the way. And that tends to be the path of many entrepreneurs. And for them to be able to really take a step back, and sometimes it's, I don't need to build the biggest company, I don't need to do the biggest thing, the boldest thing, but if I can do this one thing that I'm super passionate about, like, wow, look at the lives I can help. Or maybe, maybe I can go work for someone else or partner with someone else. And, it's kind of dropping that ego. And, a lot of times us as entrepreneurs, it is a lot of ego. It's like, I need to be the one to build that. I can build that the biggest. That, when you're competing for venture capital dollars, it's all competition. It's how can I beat how can I beat someone else to the punch? How can I raise more money? And it's really, the reality is the opposite of that. And that's why the company is called One Heart. It is what happens if we all collaborate, what happens if we all co-elevate together. How can we help each other get to a better place, and not, not focus in on how are we going to beat the next guy. Because that's a fear-based, that's fear-based operating mode. And us as entrepreneurs, and most people in general, are based on fear, and we're operating from fear. And so,
well, I mean, we're living in a world that, we're seeing more and more division. And in the process of that, there's more, therefore, an us and them, whether it's the 1% versus the rest, whether it's the 0.1% versus the 1% or the rest, whether it's that religion versus this religion, that color versus this color. And a lot of people would argue at this point that this is very nice, Brendan, but here's the reality. I got to pay the rent. It's okay for you because you could go off on your spiritual journey because you had money in the bank. You could do those kinds of things. Talk to us about some guidance for the entrepreneur who maybe feels like they're on the brink, meaning they could crack the code any minute and the business would take off. But they're feeling just beaten down, and they're feeling not good enough. They're feeling like this has not got the meaning that I want, but I know it will all, that person's saying, I know it will all transform when I get the investors' money, or when, this takes off. What would you say to them? Because I know there's a lot of those people living in that brink.
I think it's the same. I mean, it is really just relooking at your priorities. And if you have, maybe they don't even have the flexibility to take a step back, but it really is like, can you really take a step back? Is this something you're even going to want in a year or two? Because it's always the brink. There's always a brink when you're an entrepreneur. It's the brink of the next round of funding, the brink of when I hire this employee, everything's going to be different. When we get this client, everything's going to be different. And I've been on the brink of, many times. And so that's the game we teach ourselves, and we play to keep ourselves, going. But if you're going towards the wrong goal, I don't want to say it's a waste, because I think everything we do teaches us in one way or another.
Absolutely.
But the sooner we align to what it is we actually want, the better that is. And you mentioned money, and I totally get that. And I remember on my article, I got some people that were responding, oh, well, it's nice you got to go to Southeast Asia. You had some money to do that. But when I was in Southeast Asia, I mean, I saw so many people that, were living on $25 a day, had bus tables for 6 months, saved up money, living with their parents, and went out and traveled, and were, living life in ways I never lived life until, I was
Sure.
40 when I went there. So you really gotta take the time to think about what is it that life is to you. Is it make a bunch of money and have a bunch of security and a big home that you can protect yourself from the world with? Or is it, going out into the world and making your contribution now and trusting, trust is a big piece of that journey that the universe will somehow provide when you follow, kind of what that true purpose and meaning is. And the experience is that does happen. That tends to happen for people, but it's a big leap and it's a hard leap to make without doing some of this work.
Absolutely. So you were talking about your company, One Heart, and of course people can find that at oneheart.com. And you spoke about taking people on these journeys, this travel to self-explore and all that. But also part of One Heart is superfoods, and you've got involved in superfoods. That's seems different. So talk to us about why you decided to bring that in to this work.
Yeah. So yeah, kind of initially, where we were with One Heart, I mean, our goal was really to, how do we create conscious companies led by conscious entrepreneurs? And so part of that was who we met along the way. And so we met some conscious entrepreneurs. We started a company called Guided, which is brings coaching to the enterprise so that everyone, basically coaching could be a benefit within any company. Superwell, which is our superfoods company, we started because we believe, nutrition and access to healthy food is a big piece of, living a high quality life. And, there's definitely a lot more of it out there now, but there's still a lot of education that gets to happen on how some of these superfoods can really impact our lives. And if we're, scarfing down fast food or, whatever, as we're trying to build our companies and, we're just kind of perpetuating more of a cycle of lack of focus and, everything in our lives becomes more difficult when our health is not there, when our focus is not there. And so, that's just been an important part of my life and our lives and something that we felt.
But that's another point, isn't it? I mean, when you look at this fast life of the entrepreneur, again, there seems to be that polarity. There's the yoga and kale version of the fast life of entrepreneur. And then there's the other side, which is the Coca-Cola and fast food, so
Mountain Dew and Red Bull.
Like, what's that?
I said Mountain Dew and Red Bull. Yeah, they got that.
Yeah, Mountain Dew and Red Bull. The natural beverage of Silicon Valley. So it's fascinating to me that there's this. I see this. You and I talked about this in our previous conversations, but I see this compulsion within us to try and find balance. So we're doing the yoga and we're eating the kale, and we're working 16 hours and having Red Bulls. It's like it's very interesting to me that pull is on both sides, and it's interesting that you've included the superfoods in that to help the brain to recover better, to help those things along the way.
Yeah. Part of the problem of being a type A is we're type, we can be type A about anything. So it could be type A about being healthy. And, that's something I struggle with still is, and I call myself a recovering type A, but, until you beat it all out of you, you're still like, I should be doing yoga more. I should be, eating this healthier. I should be doing that, and again, it goes back to the self-love and to the understanding and to allow ourselves to let go of some of that and just be. But that's a very tough thing for type A's.
Indeed. So, I believe that without doubt that leadership, real leadership, particularly conscious leadership, requires courage. What is the most difficult leadership decision you've had to make?
Wow. I think, part of that probably goes into some of the things that I'm facing right now. I've feel like I'm kind of up against that every day. For me, there's been, mixing the plant medicine is something that I revere so highly and has such tradition, with, capitalism, with, us making claims or talking to people about how it can help them and potentially help them in their lives, has been a very difficult decision, and one that I've gone back and forth with over and over again. It feels like a responsibility in some ways that that we're taking on. And I've, a lot of people who understand what we're doing, have said, wow, that takes a lot of courage to be going and bringing people to these types of experiences where their lives, can literally shift, where there's a lot of, responsibility on how you deliver those experiences. And there's a lot of expectations, which we've discovered a lot from the people that you bring to those retreats. And one of the things that we've discovered is we've gotten people so passionate about our organization that everyone wants to really help us in some way. And
Sure.
we haven't even been equipped to figure out how to plug everyone in.
Right.
And so you end up with a lot of, there's a lot of, I don't want to say politics, but there's a lot of working with different relationships to, make sure that, once we've delivered such an experience to people, that we can help support them in what they're looking to do next, and they can help support us. But I would say that whole process right now has been, what's been on our minds a lot as we look to, as we're expanding on that, and we're getting a lot of support and people that want to help us build that out. Just thinking about, what does that mission look like? How do you scale? A mission, do we need to scale? But how do you scale something that's, really comes from such a pure place, and such a pure desire, but also recognizing that if we do want to help more people, if we do want to be able to dedicate our time to this fully, if we do want to have some of the resources that we need to really keep this going, there's a profit aspect to it, and there's a scale aspect to it. And so, that whole conversation has
like
been
you
a
said,
lot of
I
weight.
think that real leadership, particularly conscious leadership, does take courage, and I agree with you. I think that it's a daily courage thing as well as anything else. But you talked about earlier, you said that no, my language of it is that no learning is lost. So what I mean by that is that even the shit was good at some point. Every rose needs a bit of manure. And that we are all formed in some way, shape, or form, sometimes for the better, sometimes not so much, by the things that happened in our life. In what ways do you see that your childhood shaped your life, your leadership philosophy? Even in the way it was, or even in the way it is now? Because it may have driven the way you were, and it may have driven the way you are, and it may have driven both. I don't know.
Yeah. I'll give a positive and a negative. So, I feel like, my dad was a small business guy, had a used car dealership growing up, and I would, come to work with him a lot, and just always saw how he dealt with, the people that he did business with, and then the integrity that he treated them with, the integrity that he had in what his word was and what his word meant in an industry that maybe was not known for that. And I know that stuck for me a lot, and I've seen that come up repeatedly. I think negative, because it's everything's, I don't want to just make something positive or negative, but I think another thing that I've noticed is I was kind of raised to put a lot on my back, and just maybe not ask for help as much as I'd like, not share as much as I'd like, take a lot of things on. There's a lot of things. I did have a lot of love from my parents, and a lot of times it was like me not wanting to share issues or problems with them because they took it to heart so much. So there's a lot of me just taking things on for the family. That's been a struggle for me in business, where I've constantly loaded a lot of stuff up and then had to start finding ways to load it down. And then I think there's also just a general, line of fear that I've we're pretty good in my family about anticipating what could go wrong. Maybe it's the, Jewish and Jewish mother, but, and that's helped me in a lot of ways. It served me. And like, I'm always anticipating a lot of things that can happen, but that also can be very paralyzing at times. And it can be very, difficult to operate,
of course,
dealing with those fears. So that's something that
sure.
I've worked on a lot in my journey. And I would say kind of all those things have influenced.
Very cool. As a leader, particularly conscious leaders, we, and certainly in the work that you're doing, conscious leaders are committed to growth. And as successful as even you've made One Heart right now, what's one thing that you're still working on in yourself? Because I think it's important for our viewers, our listeners, to grasp that there is no there, and that the leaders that they look up to, our viewers and listeners look up to, also understand that leaders like yourself are still working on certain things. So what's one thing that you're still working on within yourself?
Absolutely. There's a lot of what I just mentioned. I mean, there's definitely, giving up of control, not feeling like I need to control things as much, and really, bringing on and trusting more and more people with things. And then I think the fear aspect, and really just operate, what we're doing. I mean, there's no way to do it without trust. I mean, none of it, if you talk to if you go try to talk to a traditional business person, they're like, you're doing what? And you're bringing people where? And so, it's pure trust, and it's a daily practice, and it's a struggle, and it's something that I know is making me better for it.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's fabulous. So as we move towards the last part of the show, let me ask you, what is a guilty pleasure for you, sir?
Sugar. That's the one thing I feel like I'm not an addictive person. That's the one thing that I just haven't quite kicked. I find healthier versions and different versions, but there's definitely have a sweet tooth.
The sweet tooth, huh?
Yeah.
What's the favorite?
Chocolate. But I have gone on, actually part of Superwell came because I started making these very healthy balls that were superfood balls. And so that was kind of, potentially a long-term plan for the business, was just make these really healthy desserts.
Just to fix yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I've never been a chocolate fan at all. And then one of my clients, who's a CEO, who I got into more of a keto sort of eating program, got some of Dave Asprey's chocolate.
Okay.
And he offered me some, and I'm like, I don't really like chocolate. And he's like, well, just try this piece. I had a bit of like, oh my God, I am hooked. Like, wow. I love their chocolate for that reason, that it's actually quite bitter, and it's not quite as, chocolate in my mind was a very sweet thing, and I'm not a sweet eater. So I was like, oh, that's yummy. So it's interesting. I mean, I also think that we evolve in our taste buds as we get a little bit mature. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
So as we come to the end of the show, what I want to ask you is, this is all, again, there are maybe many viewers and listeners that are going, oh my God, this is so aligned with what I've been thinking, feeling, maybe even resisting. Others, it's going to be so foreign to, and like, what the hell is this guy smoking? This is crazy. He must have lost the plot, whatever it is. So I want to sort of bring it all home and saying, okay, give us some practical guidance so that the person who's on the other end, who's listening or watching the show, is thinking, all right, how do I make this into a practical thing that I can go away and do, if not in the next 5 minutes, certainly in the next, few days. What's the practicality of what it is you've been sharing with us, Brandon?
Wow, that's a big one. I guess the most practicality, what it all leads down to is awareness. And how do you foster awareness in your life? And there's a lot of ways to do that. I mean, that is, some people can do that through meditation. Some people, maybe yoga assist, maybe some people it's talking to a therapist or a coach. There's a lot of ways to create awareness. I think when people are struggling, a lot of times they get deeper and deeper into that struggle. And that's in many ways the opposite of awareness. That's ruminations, and that's just their mind running and running and running. And so I think ultimately, if you're at a place in your life where you are looking to make changes, you are looking at, maybe changing the way you operate, possibly changing what you do, possibly changing how you show up with other people, with friends and family. Really the only way I know to get there is through awareness. And I think all of these tools, everything that we do, everything is really different ways to get to that awareness, because without that awareness, you really can't make those changes. And so
the person sitting there listening around and go, okay, where do I start? Where do I start getting awareness? Because I used to teach this in one of our programs, which was, I'd say, okay, describe consciousness. And people would like, well, I'm awake or I'm asleep. Yep. But do you dream when you're asleep? Yes. Is that a form of consciousness? We start examining consciousness. So we can do the same thing with awareness here. So the person saying, okay, I am aware. I'm aware the sky is blue. I'm aware the sea is this color. I'm aware of the wind. What's the step in this other level of awareness that is not surface?
So how to get there, or
what would be a practical tool?
Yeah, journaling is definitely a practical tool. Starting to write down, your thoughts a bit more, and maybe go a bit deeper. So, I'm feeling really frustrated. Why are you feeling frustrated? And then maybe asking yourselves a series of why questions that take it down, multiple levels. Certainly speaking to a coach or someone like that can often help. I mean, that is essentially what they're meant to do. They're meant to help you, basically mirror back the patterns that you're speaking from. And oftentimes it's really obvious. I mean, for other people, especially those are coaching and those who have been doing some of this work, we can hear when people are going in these circles and these rabbit holes. And when we're in them, it's not that clear. And so it's really, how do you stop that? And, it's some form of writing, of sitting silently with yourself, or speaking to someone who is either a coach or just a really good listener and reflector. Not necessarily someone who's going to tell you what you need to do all the time, but someone that can help you reflect back what you're telling them and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, and I think just to sort of clarify that for everybody for a moment is, the first thing I would say to anybody watching, listening is, you've heard me say it before, that it's impossible to be fully objective in your own subjective reality. You can't fully step outside of yourself, and there are ways to create a greater level of that. And the first of that, I agree with you fully, Brendan, is to write stuff down. It's amazing. I've got bookcases full of journals of just writing stuff down, and then realizing that when I finish writing 10, 15 minutes, an hour, 2 hours later, and I read back and I go, holy crap, because it gives me that objectivity of my subjective reality. And that is wonderful. People say, well, I don't like writing. Okay, then here's what you do. Pick up your phone and start recording. Just talk it out and leave it alone, and then come back and play it to yourself. It's amazing what you will hear. But as you're saying, that's what, if you really want to step into this, finding a guide, finding a coach, finding a therapist, finding somebody who can actually listen to you and have a little bit of reflection is vastly important. But the thing I would say to you is, yeah, the journaling is great, but remember, no one, and I mean no one, does it alone. You can't get there on your own. I've been doing this work, this consciousness work for, would you believe it? Yes, about 40 plus years actively, and longer than that from when I was a kid. And I'm still not fully objective in my subjective reality. I still have people who assist me. And if you think because you've suddenly had this awakening on Tuesday because you ate a bagel and it stuck in your throat and you thought you might die, that's a good start. But don't get stuck there. Don't start doing, as as Brendan shared with us here, don't do the A-type thing of thinking, I can do this and I'm going to carry all the weight and I'm going to ride Mount Sinai to the top and I'm going to meet God and I'm going to have this great experience. That's not actually how it works. So I love that you are reminding people to find a way to have objectivity around their subjective reality. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Please tell our viewers, our listeners, where they can find out more about you, about your company, about these journeys, about all the great things that you're doing, all the wonderful resources that you're offering.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's oneheart.com. It's the number one heart.com. Also, our journeys are at oneheartjourneys.com. And if you want to find me, I'm at Brandon E or at Brand1 on Medium. That's where I do my writing. I'm on Instagram, not that active, but yeah, you can find me on social media at Brand1, pretty much any social media.
Fabulous. Thank you very much for that. And of course, we will make sure that we post all those links in the show notes so that you'll have full access to them as you're listening, as you're watching, so you can get access to all of that. And we want to thank our guest today. Thank you so much, Brendan. It's been a pleasure having you here. Thank you for all that you shared. Thank you for your kindness and your generosity and all of that. We appreciate it.
Thank you for doing this, Dov. Really appreciate it.
And I hope you'll stick with us to the end. And for you, dear listener, I want to say, remember, a lot of this may be outside of your comfort zone. But what I want to remind you of is everything that you enjoy was at some point outside of your comfort zone. Everything that challenged you, that has actually brought you great joy in your life, is something that was outside of your comfort zone for a while. And I encourage you to just sit outside of your comfort zone, even on the outer edge, because amazing things can happen there. To hang out with other conscious leaders and chat about this show or any past episodes, you can go onto Facebook and you can find our group there, Dov Baron Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. If you want to find out more about hiring me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or a consultant strategist for your company, you can simply go to fullmontyleadership.com/consulting or /speaking. And be aware that the research consistently shows that even the fastest growing companies face a very similar challenge in that they're spending a fortune in training and attracting the top talent only to have them leave at an alarming rate. If you're sick of investing in your ROI, and before you get your ROI, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, because you can't outsource authenticity. You can also tap into getting your own authentic leadership matrix assessment tool. It's the way for you to assess your leadership in 5 key areas, and it's absolutely free to you. It's valued at $197, but you get it free for being a listener. Just simply go to matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. You don't need a www, just matrix like the movie, .fullmontyleadership.com. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about what it would really be like for you at a level of fulfillment to be a conscious leader running a conscious business. I'm Dov Baron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.